the second time that we've done this, and really what the idea behind tonight's meeting is that we've recognized that before things ever show up here for us to consider, a lot of work needs to be done to develop it. We decided that maybe have a little, a bit of a systematic process for helping decide as a board collectively how we think staff's time and the township's resources should be deployed to just work on developing ideas that haven't been fully baked yet. Right, that takes effort, and like, how do we allocate those resources? Because as we knew already, and as we discovered last year, all the things that we want to do can't all get done in a year, and we need to find ways to prioritize. We need to prioritize before we know enough to know whether we want to do it. Right, we don't yet know what we don't know, and so we need to decide. Okay, there's an area that we think we want to work on, and see if there's actually policy there that we want to develop or implement. So that's the point. So there are no votes or decisions on policy that are going to happen tonight. We aren't even going to decide on what the board's priorities are tonight. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to hear from the chairs of the various committees. First, what they've been working on, because last year we had a meeting like this and we're sort of already underway on some priorities, some of which have come before the board within the course of the year and some of which are still being worked on, and what else they would propose that we add to the queue. And really tonight is just a way for everyone on this board to hear from our colleagues what they think it's important for us to work on. And that's going to be a lot of stuff, and we're not going to be able to do it all. So what we're going to do after this is, the list of the proposed priorities that have come from this board this evening are going to get circulated to the entire board, and the board each individually scores it. And then each commissioner scores it, and those scores are aggregated. And the aggregated scores are provided to the entire board and is provided to township management as a sense of where the collective desire for the board to devote our energies to develop potential policies to bring to the board for actual consideration, again in public, right? And so we choose to do this in public so people who, if they're interested, can kind of hear what's on our mind, can certainly reach out to commissioners later and weigh in on it. But it's really, we're not deliberating tonight, we're just basically presenting to each other. Though there is an opportunity for the commissioners to ask each other clarifying questions or if they have constructive suggestions. But really the goal is not to spend a lot of time on it tonight because we're not developing things to consider. We're just simply planning on what to plan, right, in a sad bureaucratic way. Okay, so but it turns out I think to be fairly efficient. So since this is a workshop, there is no public comment tonight. It's really for the board to hear from each other. And the way we're going to work it is we're going to go through the committees. We're doing it in alphabetical order by committee this year. We went in reverse alphabetical order last year, so that's somewhat fair. We will give the opportunity if you have questions for your colleagues after they do that, but it's really not the time to be deliberating or expositing. And it's also not the time to say, hey, I support this or I don't support that. That's not what we're doing tonight, right? Tonight we're just kind of presenting and we'll figure out what we support later. Okay, so that's the game plan. We've got a number of committees. We're going to try and keep it to 10 to 15 minutes per committee, so we got here in a reasonable amount of time. Don't feel the need to take 10 minutes if you don't need 10 minutes. Just trying to spend enough time that we can understand what's going on and we'll be able to make informed decisions down the road about when we're doing our scoring. Okay, so that's the game plan. Any questions for me? Yeah.
So President Stein, I thank you for that explanation. I heard you say, so as we plan to plan, and then we determine priorities, and then staff will do work to develop policies. But also, I hope you also intend to say that staff will also develop cost estimates where appropriate.
Yeah, so thank you for adding that. That is exactly right. So in the whole grand scheme of we're not actually deciding anything, what I think we've recognized in the past that there's this chicken and egg thing, right? Do we want to do this thing? Well, we don't know how much it's going to cost. Well, how do we know how much it's going to cost until we actually start to develop it? And so we're looking for a pre-development phase where we're doing enough work to figure out how much something would cost so we can make an informed decision down the road where we have all the information, including cost information.
Great.
And so thank you for raising that. It's an important clarification. And it really underscores like why we're not making any decisions tonight.
Right.
Really this is trying to figure out where we should, a process for helping staff understand where they should start collecting that information.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so I guess we will get underway. So the first committee for tonight is the ad hoc. Its chair, Commissioner Stevenson, couldn't be here tonight, so we are going to turn it to Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Thank you, President Sinai. I have one update on an affordable housing piece of work that we did last year, which is to look into tangled title reform. The committee researched options and decided that the place where that would best be addressed would be by the Montgomery County Bar
Commissioner Kramer, would you
Association.
mind, could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we've decided we are not the best body to work on tangled title reform. That should live at the Montgomery County Bar Association, with the Bar Association, so we've closed the chapter on that priority. For this year, we have a number of projects that we'll be working on. We are working on expanding Ardmore House. We were awarded a $3 million grant from the county's ARPA funds to assist with the project, and in April, this board authorized the execution of an agreement with the consultants to proceed with phase 1 of the project, which includes a feasibility analysis and preparation to seek other funding. We plan to look at the zoning code and consider several revisions and incentives for affordable housing. Things that we'll be thinking about include discussion of whether to include accessory dwelling units in our zoning code, in some form affordable housing overlay districts that would allow nonprofit housing organizations to develop affordable housing, fees on short-term rentals to contribute to the Affordable Housing Fund. And we have been and will continue to be meeting regularly to discuss these topics. We are also exploring purchasing specific properties for affordable housing. We've been looking at several potential properties that would provide affordable housing units and may also accomplish other board priorities at the same time. We don't have any new news on that yet, but we're still considering several different properties. In addition, we have a few items that are on our docket for future discussion this year, including how best to use the Affordable Housing Fund, whether to use to institute a community land trust to protect existing affordable housing, and whether to explore tax abatement to promote affordable housing development.
Great. Any questions for Commissioner Sean Kramer? Yeah, Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, President. This might be a question for our township manager. I'm just curious how much money is currently in the Affordable Housing Fund, and have we received payments from Suburban Square and I think 355 Lancaster also took care of that, and I can't remember if Piazza took advantage of that as well.
We've only received payments from Suburban Square at this point, and the total is roughly around 1.4 million in the Affordable Housing Fund.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thanks, President Sinai, and I just would, as a member of the committee, I would just like to clarify what Commissioner Kramer said, that because at the end she mentioned the idea of a land trust and the idea of a tax abatement. Those are not priorities. Those are just topics of discussion for the ad hoc committee. So this is a priorities discussion. I just thought that was important to clarify that.
Okay, sounds good. Vice President Gavin.
So I had a question. Commissioner Kramer, we've talked in the past about affordable housing for meaning different things. Mm-hmm. One is kind of working poor. One is seniors in the community who maybe can't afford to live here anymore. They want to live here. We've talked about volunteer firefighters and kind of providing for them. within the priorities, are we talking about any specific group? Are we talking about all the groups?
We're talking about all the groups. Yeah, we're going to need different initiatives to work for different groups.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Kramer. So the next committee is Ad Hoc Sidewalks Committee, and I'm the chair of that. And so I just want to bring really the public up to speed on where this stands. The mandate for the Ad Hoc Sidewalks Committee was to consider really two things. One is if the board wished to build out any part of the sidewalk network, like how would we figure out where those should go and what the priorities would be? What would that network look like? And the second is, of course, how that would be paid for. And bring recommendations back to this board for consideration. So where we are right now is in the development of the priorities of the network part. And here's how that started. That started with really a mapping of every place where we thought there would be a sidewalk need. Staff with GIS had an algorithm for deciding or measuring where sidewalks would be sort of scored, how you would score them. And then we spent a bunch of time really trying to figure out where the algorithm worked and where it did not, right? And we're really trying to balance two things. One is a sense of, hey, you kind of know it when you see it, like a sidewalk is needed here, along with trying to come up with some metrics to figure out systematically where sidewalks would score high. So you have a way of actually saying, look, we have measurable ways of saying, no, this is where it's really needed, this is where it's not. When you do that, you're able to distill sidewalks down into some rough categories, right? It's not very precise scoring, but like there really are probably like A-level sidewalks that are kind of important. And they're important because either they're high bang for the buck, or they are a infill where you have some existing sidewalks that just need to be connected, and then it basically erases a bottleneck, or it's in a high priority need near a school or a neighborhood with kids, and there's just kind of a lot of safety issues, or it's connecting a lot of people to a destination that's kind of important, like a school or whatever. And so once you have that, one needs to provide cost estimates for priority sidewalks. And that turns out to be a complicated exercise, and that's really where we've gone through. We had done preliminary cost estimates to help us sort of sort it out. And now what we've done is distilled it down to a smaller number of sidewalks, so Public Works Department can really sort of come up with better cost estimates for these things. I think our Public Works Director tends to say, I think he's probably more right than not about this, that there's a reason that there are no sidewalks in some places, is that they happen to be the most expensive places to build them, and that's so no one ever did it. And so we're kind of dealing with that. There's also trying to route sidewalks to avoid things like old mature trees and other things that are tend to be in the rights of ways where you would normally put sidewalks. So all of that is just basically trying to do the blocking and tackling of distilling, of smoothing off the rough edges of what the recommendations would be before it comes to this board. And then the last thing for our committee to do, once we actually understand what the cost would be of really the what we would recommend as the highest priority sidewalks, would be sort of as a committee deciding what kind of recommendation we would make on how those things would be funded. But we have not gotten to that stage yet. Okay. And so that's what we have. There's sort of a powerful GIS mapping system that is gotten increasingly developed and improved to help us kind of understand, really what the potential usage would be if you built a sidewalk, right? If you have some place that no one walks because there's no safe way to walk there, like how do you figure out how many people would actually use it if you actually built it, right? And that's a kind of a measure using GIS of saying how many people live in an area that could potentially be connected to some place that they want to go on that side. Okay. I will tell this board this, when the recommendation gets brought back, there are way more probably sidewalk, or areas where you'd say, yeah, it'd be really nice to have a sidewalk, then, we as a board are likely to do, because they are expensive, and there's a lot of places in this township that don't have sidewalks. But we can, start knocking off like the really highest value ones, if the board decides to do, wants to do that. Okay, so that's where things stand. I'll propose as a priority that we finish this off. That's not going to be an obvious priority in the following sense, which is one of the things I think we learned as we got through this, or we got into this, is that really sidewalks are just one example of circulation through the township, right? Bicycles might be another way. Pedestrian circulation by segregating off part of a roadway or doing some other way to give people safe places to walk might be another way, right? And so we've called it sidewalks, but it's like, well, should it really just be sidewalks? But we're trying to avoid having too much scope creep. But anyway, that's where things stand. Any questions or comments for me? Commissioner Kramer.
One of the things that I hear from constituents about more than anything else is the need for sidewalks. And I do think that this committee needs to have a higher priority to try to bring it to closure and to start constructing if we so decide. And to just study it and study it and study it doesn't solve the problems that people are having with safety on a day-to-day basis.
So I'll respond to that. I will remind this board that while I appreciate Commissioner Kramer's support, that I also think it's a valuable thing to do. This is really not the meeting to be to be doing that. However, I'll take a little. I'll be a little defensive about the study comment, in that it turns out not to be an easy problem. And we need a way to actually prioritize things, because don't want to be in a situation where everyone argues for so much that none of it gets done, right? Like we need a way of actually accomplishing it. However, I will say a scoring thing is going to circulate after this, and that's going to give anyone who feels a way to say let's make this the top priority. They can score it that way, and I'm sure the message would be sent to the committee chair. Anyone else? Commissioner Zoll.
President Sinai, isn't one of the very big issues and it's really a policy issue for the board to address at some point, is who pays, right? Because today, homeowners and property owners pay. And so any change in that is a significant decision that would be a significant policy change for this board to discuss.
Without a doubt. And like I said, the committee has yet to come up with what its recommendation is going to be for that.
Right.
There will be a recommendation. I would suggest that it does not necessarily need to be one size fits all.
Okay.
And so there can be different categories of these things.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, President. I want to be cognizant of your scope creep comments, but I did want to add something because it's come up in conversation with the school district on multiple developments with regard to an alternative to sidewalks in ecologically sensitive areas like wetlands or going around old growth trees or places where it's hard to develop because of steep embankments. They have proposed walking trails, and I know that potentially overlaps with, say, Parks and Rec, but as an alternative to a sidewalk, a walking trail sort of near the street can be a very pleasant experience and potentially even better with regard to impervious surface. And so I hope that if it is legal for the township to build those in lieu of sidewalks, that is an option.
Thank you for that good suggestion. Vice President Gavin.
Two clarifying points. One on walking trails, I think you're right. We've done that with a couple of schools. The one issue with it is they're not necessarily ADA compliant, which causes problems. So I wouldn't want to say, oh, we can do this in lieu of that. It's just something to keep in mind. Two, Commissioner Zelov, you talked about the current policy is homeowners pay for sidewalks. That's not always the case. We've had a number of sidewalks paid for that are important sidewalks for the township. again, whether we have a one-size-fits-all, whatever happens moving forward, there are some sidewalks that have been privately paid for, some that have been publicly paid for. So that's kind of where we've been.
There have been some recent exceptions.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that clarification, Vice President Gabbard. Anyone else? Okay, so with that, we will move along to the Building and Planning Committee. In its chair is Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Committee's major priorities this year run kind of like greatest hits because you've all seen them before by and large, but they still remain top priorities for the committee. And that does not imply that in some cases there hasn't been progress made by staff, but it shows that they're priorities and there's still work to be done. That's particularly with the first priority, which is increased enforcement of permit conditions, conditions of approval, and property codes. We've discussed this in prior years at this meeting and on other occasions. In many respects, our code enforcement is reactive rather than proactive, and commissioners and residents have expressed desire that we be more proactive in that, and we have added a person on the building and planning staff, but there's more work to be done with that. So I won't go into that because I think we're all very familiar. The next one is increased online access to permits, licenses, conditions of approval, and the historical registry. Another thing we've talked about previously. With respect to the historical registry, that is totally offline since we migrated websites. So if someone is looking to purchase a historical property, they can't necessarily find it without contacting staff. We've talked about in the past of having conditions of approval for development projects available online, and maybe even in a way that they can be monitored progress with compliance more easily by not just commissioners but also civic associations and residents. And then permits and licenses as well. The historic preservation law update, we saw some fine-tuning of some parts of the historic laws recently, but there's more work to be done, particularly with trying to protect, maybe better protect Class 2 properties, and consistent with last week's conversation about the view shed and landscape site study, more refining of the historic code to better protect our open space and our historic properties. So those are things that were the board considered priorities last year, and we're asking the board to consider those priorities this year as well. I will mention three other things, three other areas where, one of them I put on, the committee put on the list, two that our building and planning director, Chris, asked to talk to me about, and I decided to add them as sort of, these are also things that we're working on, but maybe not as important and level as the other things. The first is the Ardmore Master Plan adoption. I don't mean to imply that's not important. I'm confident we're going to get that done, but I think it is a priority to get it done for this board and for the community. The other two is really what I was referring to. The Neighborhood Conservation District is something that we may see brought by staff in the coming weeks, and I think it's a good idea. That would better protect traditional residential neighborhoods where we've seen in parts of the township tear downs of houses that fit to be replaced by large mansions, larger residents that take up almost the entire space on the lot. There's a sense that we need better protection for that, and in certain zoning areas we might want to look at that to see how we can make new homes be more harmonious with the homes that they're replacing. The other thing, active transportation planning, coincidentally kind of jives with the sidewalk conversation. The building and planning staff has recognized that their staff and other departments should work better so that when we talk about improving circulation in the township, we not just think about roads and bike paths, which are important, but also think about sidewalks, other paths, different traffic safety measures, and coordinate that amongst township departments better when we're talking about improvements, so it's kind of like a more unified and coordinated approach. And as I say, that is not something that the committee is asking for this board to consider a major priority, unless of course the board wants to, but it's kind of just this is something that we're working on in the department. So if anyone has any questions on any of those things. Yes.
Thanks, Commissioner Grimes. I just would note that we typically receive master plans, not adopt them.
Thank you. You're correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else? If I mention sidewalks, we'll have more conversation.
You're just getting too much done. I think that's the issue.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, I'll cede the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. So with that, we are on to the Economic Development Committee, and we are back to Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Thank you, President Steiner. We have several priorities for this committee this year. We'll be focusing on supporting commercial areas, implementing strategies to revitalize commercial areas, like doing things like streetscape improvements and targeted efforts to attract customers and promote vibrant business environments. And some examples of that work
Commissioner
include...
Craig, can you just lean
Am I
a drop
still not
closer
loud?
to the mic?
Are you able to?
Leave it that way.
Leave it that way.
I'll try. I'm sorry.
The teacher's voice.
Focusing on Ardmore, how's that? On Ardmore, we'll be looking at the Shoffley Green design, streetscape plan, and wayfinding signage to help people find the garage. The staff will be working with the City Avenue District on a retail study, streetscape plan, expansion of the Indigo bicycle program, and also supporting work around Abala District of the Arts, which is near and dear to Commissioner Kramer's heart. We'll also be talking about considering the extent to which the township should plan downtown corridors collectively rather than individually. And then when Ardmore and Bala, work has gone underway, the township would like to turn its attention to smaller main streets and commercial areas like Penwyn, Montgomery Avenue and Bala, Gladwin Village, Bryn Mawr, and others. We'll be considering expanding transportation options to and from the commercial corridors, thinking about new ways to retain businesses, supporting them to help to thrive and grow. Things like the Indigo bike share is a function of that goal. Working with the downtown businesses in Bala, they've indicated that they want the Indigo bike share for their staff. Coordinating with development projects to make sure that development activities within the commercial districts are in line with the goals of the comprehensive plan and master planning documents, and making sure that we emphasize the incorporation of high-quality active streetscape elements and providing community amenities. We'll also be looking at sustainable economic development, talking with the sustainability officer to promote strategies in the sustainability plan across the commercial districts. Last, we'll also be talking about the staff is continuing to learn about the economic development tools that are available to first-class townships in Pennsylvania and implementing them here in Lower Merion. One goal that we did have for our committee last year was to draft a vision statement for the economic development work of the township, and we do have a draft vision statement that I can read if you want, or we can not if you don't want. I'll read it.
I think it's a nice statement. I think you
not
should
that
read
long.
it. And
Yeah. Lower Merion's commercial districts blend a mix of retail, office, and residential uses that provide both day and night experiences for residents and visitors. These areas provide easy access to a variety of local goods and services for community members in the surrounding walkable residential neighborhoods and include public spaces like parks and plazas that promote activity and facilitate community interaction. Development within the commercial corridors is designed to be human-scaled, with a focus on walkability and creating a sense of place that is easily accessible to residents and visitors. Architectural styles and materials are reflective of existing built environment and history of the area, but focused on high-quality design that enhances the overall character and identity of the commercial districts.
Thank you.
Rick's
Any
smiling at me.
questions or comments? Yeah, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. Commissioner Kramer, just to follow up on the City Avenue District project, there have been some developments. One is a retail study, I think has been or is about to be awarded, and it's going to
About
be.
to, yeah.
It's about to, and I think it's going to be excellent because
Yeah.
it's going to allow the City Avenue Special Services District and the township to be proactive in terms of helping businesses rather than being reactive and seeing who plops down, another vaping store or another thing that isn't so great. So I think that everybody's very excited about that. The streetscape plan is great. That has been awarded to Salt Design Studios run by Sarah Shu, who many of us know, who's very talented and has worked with the township in the past. There's a working group of 12 of us, including me and Jillian Dirks, we met last week. We're all excited about it. It's really a good group, and it's gonna be a greening. We're gonna have trees and something that really will elevate that area from certain stretches now, which desperately need it. So I think we're excited about that. The Indigo expansion has been approved, so I think that was township staff, Chris and Jillian were very helpful on that. So that's great. We're gonna have better, people will be able to use Indigo bikes to get down to the waterfront and so forth. So that's great. I know that Commissioner Gilda Kramer is probably going to want to talk about the Ballard District of the Arts, but that's an exciting thing, and there's a working group that she is sort of running with that, and lots of things underway to kind of get some activity there and have sort of a focus of things that can be done on that stretch of Ballard Avenue, but currently are not being done. So thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner
Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Anyone else? Yeah, Commissioner Courtney.
In previous conversations about economic development in the downtown areas, we've talked about potentially doing retail recruitment. Is that a priority that the committee considered as a potential expansion of the staff function?
Yes, and the staff works closely with the business improvement districts to do that recruitment. Different business improvement districts have different approaches, and the staff is trying to help them identify best practices that apply across the business improvement districts. Some business improvement districts, it needs to be very local for some of them, so some practices are unique to one particular area. But yeah.
So then the committee's feeling that it should be a function of the business improvement districts and not staff going forward?
When it can, I think they go hand in hand. I think it's a strategic question for us to ask about whether staff should take on a greater role in that going forward. I think there is an opportunity for us to use, to kind of centralize some of those functions and maybe look at, if there are tools like retail, software and stuff that makes sense for it to live at the township level because of economy of scale. I think those are questions that we're going to be talking about this year with the staff.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll jump into it because I'm on this committee, and I want to thank Commissioner Kramer for running it. It meets fairly regularly, and it's engaging in what is a really fundamental and difficult issue, right? Which is the traditional role of our downtown areas is evolving to really be an amenity for our residents, right? So it's like you're not heading into the city, during the day, or you're at home, right? And you're coming into our downtown. And so they need to evolve and be positioned to support that. In understanding, trying to figure out what that looks like, in how to move it there, is important. And it's happening at a time when like traditional uses are also changing, right? So we don't have downtown hardware stores anymore, right? I mean, so what are they, right? So the things that prior to COVID attracted people into center cities, attracted young professionals in center cities, the number one predictor was restaurants, right? That's how you knew where people were going to go. And it tends to be the same sort of thing here. It ends up being quality of life downtowns. And so, a lot of the things that I think you see here, that City Avenue Special Services District, by dint of having, a really large, valuable footprint and is extremely well run, is already like running with, is saying, okay, well, what is that package of amenities that makes it like these are places people want to go and where people want to spend time, right? Because what follows from that is businesses, because businesses are looking to locate in places where their tenants actually and their employees want to go, right? And no one wants to go to some random place anymore. You want to go to some place where you actually want to be, like when you're not actually in the room. And so, that's what our downtowns are going to evolve to be. And so, that's a lot of balls in the air for the committee, and that's why you see things like, I think, like streetscape as being important and green spaces as being important. It's like, it's developing those package of resident amenities and, worker amenities when they're not working, right? That is, really what the attractive force is for commerce these days, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
You just reminded me that you've had conversations with larger companies, and staff has had conversations with larger companies to ask them, why Lower Merion or not Lower Merion, so that we can learn about how to make our township attractive to those kinds of companies. And we've learned that, that they want places that their staff can afford to live in, right? And their staff want to be in places that are fun to live in, where you can walk around and there's stuff to do. So the downtowns are all the more important.
Commissioner Bernhardt.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I know this isn't to drill down to specifics, and it's noted here, township should turn its attention to smaller main streets and areas in need of deferred maintenance like Penwyn, Montgomery Avenue and Bala, Gladwin Village, Bryn Mawr, and others. Focusing on the and others and Montgomery Avenue, a couple years ago, there was legs with some type of movement with Narberth, Chris Lesling and I, and Narberth Township, whatever I forget what the equivalent is, the borough, no, but the manager, as well as some members of their board met to talk about the landscape along Montgomery Avenue in that area, which goes, Narberth on one side, Penn Valley on the other, and the fact that it needs improvement as well, which will help generate some of the businesses, some which were closing up shop. And Narberth on its side now has plans for residential units. I forget how many it is, a couple, like 200 if I'm not mistaken, right near that corner. So I mentioned this just to make sure this one gets on its radar, and that we pick up again with Narberth, because they were very, very enthusiastic about, doing something collaboratively.
Thank you.
That's all.
Great,
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. So moving along, the next committee is the Fire Committee, and its chair is Commissioner Bernhardt.
I'll be shorter in this than I was in that last comment. So for the Fire Committee, one of the things that we have been working on is, in essence, the implementation of the strategic plan, and the next major hurdle for that was the memorandum of understanding with each of the fire companies. Several iterations of its draft has gone back and forth, and in fact, I'm not mistaken, and Ernie, you can correct me, I think June 6th, we have a meeting planned with our manager, our new fire chief, and some of the presidents, chiefs of the stations, so that we can get this into final form. We're about a stone's throw away, So we will have that in place, and that is not to be underestimated. It's really a major step in order to be able to do things so that we recognize and appreciate the vitality of the individual fire companies, but yet they operate more smoothly under the umbrella of Lower Merion Fire Department. So that remains priority number one. And then the other never-ending priority is the recruitment and the retention of volunteer firefighters. It is systemically a problem throughout the nation. We have about 230 plus or minus volunteers. We have to replace about 10% of those each year. And because of the constraints they have on their daily lives, it becomes, more difficult for some than others to go ahead and volunteer. As you all know, this board immediately adopted, when the state allowed us, the tax credit rebate for 100%. And I've had the opportunity to appear twice before the school board. This is on their agenda for their upcoming budget. They don't have to do 100%. I did advocate that they would do so. In fact, even last evening, the Gladwin Civic was uniformly in favor of trying to get in touch with the school board to say that they support this, and it may be time for us to let the school board know this is something that they can help with the recruitment and retention of volunteers and, having this pass through their budget. So those are the two main ticket items for right now for our fire service, which most recently, and Commissioner Zeloff mentioned it the other night, has shown how quick they are. And when they went at 4 in the morning and from the alarm bell off to putting a major fire out, it took about an hour. And that's just remarkable. So that's the fire committee report.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Any questions for fire committee? Okay, thanks a lot. The next committee is Grants and Community Development. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you so much, President Sinai. Good evening. I first want to start by thanking Commissioners Stevenson and McKeon, who were really instrumental in helping us get to this point and sort of maybe making recommendations to reimagine how sort of the Grants Committee functions. And so this overview is really a question of really needing feedback and trying to see whether there is a tolerance for this type of a shift. So because we didn't meet last year and have a group of priorities, this is really the launching point for the discussion. So we're really focusing on our assumed priorities here and then some new objectives that we're thinking of. So the committee as a whole, as many of you know, when you really think about it, the focus has really just been on the grant side of the committee and the community development name of the committee, in which we are supposed to be addressing, it's kind of been on the wayside. We haven't really been focusing much on that week to week, and the committee's work is really just, for the most part, organizing and managing the CDBG program. That's been the heart and soul of the work that we've done, which has been incredibly rewarding and important. It isn't to diminish that piece. But we also know that the committee is involved in theory with providing the tools necessary to ensure that our nonprofit sector remains strong and is also vibrant in support of the work that the township is doing for them, for the community. So our priorities are really to maintain at a very good level the CDBG activities, including the management of emergency transfers when they sometimes occur, to improve the transparency of grants and receivership to or distributed by the township, to enhance the CDBG and ARPA planning and reporting and communication out to the public and to staff. And possibly the intent is to create a community foundation to augment some of the good work that the township investment has really been focused on, based on the community survey that's out, ARPA, and other departmental priorities. So really that's it in a nutshell. The two areas of focus being grant, what we want that to look like, staying the course with just CDBG is excellent course. If we decided to make some changes to how we evaluate and function, we would be open to that eventuality if the board would like us to go in that direction. And then on the community development side, again, really focusing on the tools, really improving the tools that are really necessary in order to support our nonprofit sector, which is so robust. And in the collection that we received actually from the Stormwater Committee, we have in the hundreds of nonprofit organizations that might need more support if they know to ask, So it's really diving deep into that and to really exploring where they are, what are they doing, what are their needs, and really assessing what that might look like. So, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner
Sure,
O'Neill.
thank you.
Excuse me, do any of my colleagues have questions for Commissioner O'Neill, or comments or suggestions? Yeah, Vice President Gavin.
So I know there was some discussion about providing coaching or, information to a lot of the organizations to help them kind of professionalize a little more. Where does that stand right now?
Sure. So we've had one training session last September. We had about 20 participants, including executive staff and board members of those organizations. I was on Zoom. We had a moderator who did a fantastic job. Commissioner Kramer was able to really confirm that person's attendance. We are now scheduling round 2 of that training. That is all CDBG funded, and that getting all the nonprofits together in a room and knowing that we're here for them and can provide these things to help them with fundraising, with governance, all the types of things that maybe they're not all created equal. So we want to be supportive there.
That's great. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, everyone. So we're now on to the Health Committee. Its chair is Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. The HAC's priorities are pretty comparable to what we had last year, although the obvious changes, COVID-19 and pandemic preparedness has dropped off a bit. Nonetheless, we regard as a priority our ongoing coordination and contact with Montgomery County on health issues, and again, not to be an alarmist, but future variants could be down the road, so we're not going to completely shut that down. So that will remain ongoing. Probably our biggest priority right now is the effort to increase public awareness about the risks from opioid epidemic, and we've done a fair amount on that so far. Earlier in the year, we did a couple of Narcan training sessions with the assistance of Narberth Ambulance and Chris Flanagan. They were oversubscribed. They were really well done. They were informative. And I think we're going to continue to keep that as something we want to do. We also, with the help of Laura Jennings, our PIO, and Mark Murray, did a series of PSAs. I see Commissioner Gavin smiling. I think he was a participant. A number of us did. They were great. They're still running. I think one of them ran today, but just kind of letting people know fentanyl is a huge risk. It's a dangerous thing. The opioid crisis is real, and it's everywhere, including in Lower Merion. 3 weeks ago, we did a virtual town hall with 2 experts on opioid issues. One is affiliated with Penn Medicine. The other is the deputy director of the city's opioid task force. It was very informative, and we're going to turn that into a Health Matters show using sort of the Q&A from that. So that's a priority. The other priorities, in no particular order, though, are monitoring community needs, particularly the elderly and children impacted by the pandemic. One of the things we did, this was spearheaded by Lou Rossman, who is a HAC member and is the only candidate for Commissioner Ward 9, so something you will be seeing more of him. But he did a great job in terms of dental care, no-cost dental care for seniors by enlisting Harcum and a volunteer group of dentists to provide screening and basic health care. We may expand that depending on ARP fund availability, but there are other areas that we're looking at. As I said, we're also continuing to work with Montgomery County, the Office of Public Health, and partnering on various initiatives, including preparedness and so forth. And finally, this summer, we're embarking on sort of a new public education campaign for sort of seasonal things, kind of traditional things about pool and water safety, possibly making sure that gun locks, firearm owners, if they're aware that gun lock devices are available, other stuff like kind of use of sunscreens, poison ivy, and just general, Lyme disease, things that people kind of know, but just a general reminder that these are things that are out there, and just an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that's basically it. It's not a huge difference from last year, but we're making progress, and we're pretty enthusiastic about what we've done so far. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McComb. Any questions for comments? Yeah.
I
Commissioner
just want to
Kramer.
thank the Health Committee for its work on opiate awareness and Narcan, and I think it's so critical. Are fentanyl test kits available to residents of Montgomery County? Do you know?
I'm going to defer to Lori, who is the expert on all things in terms of testing, but I'm not sure of the answer.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Montgomery
I'd like to-
County Office of Public Health does have test kits right now.
Okay.
They have not implemented them to come out. They're still trying to figure out how they're going to do
Okay,
that.
thank you.
I think the state has authorized them, but I think there are subsequent steps that have to be taken to make them available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions or comments for Commissioner McComb? Okay, so we will move to the Library Committee, and we are back to Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would just like to. What's that?
Ask for a raise.
The first thing I'd like to say is a thank you to Manager McNeely for a great hire in our new Director of Libraries, Lynn Williamson. She has hit the ground running and is a pleasure to work with, and has been moving straight ahead with implementing the strategic plan and doing a ton of hiring at the same time. It's been really impressive, and the hires have been really great. So this year, the Library Committee plans to encourage the development of a culture of philanthropy for Lower Merion Library System, working with the Director of Libraries and the Director of Development for the libraries to help them to support the individual library boards and their fundraising efforts, helping them understand, learn best practices and figure out ways to increase their fundraising for their particular libraries, and also working with the Lower Merion Library System Foundation to increase overall system-wide fundraising, particularly planned giving, which is putting the library system in your will. So the Director of Libraries will be working on a planned giving program and working on some major giving with individual donors as well. The second major goal for this committee is just to continue to support the implementation of the strategic planning goals for the library system. One thing I just will flag for the rest of the board is that one of those goals is making the libraries visible and part of the community. And the Director of Libraries has just let me know that would include improving external communications and social media and PR for the library system. And that may involve a budget item at some point. So just continuing to explore that, and I'll just letting you know. Might be talking about money at some point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. So we're now on to open space and township properties, and that's Commissioner Gilda Kramer.
Thank you. Last year, we focused more heavily on the open space aspect of this committee, and we had the township staff mapped the open space and the township properties within in a visual way, so that we could see what was open and what was developed, what was not developed, and what we owned, and so that we'd have a sense visually of what we have and what potential opportunities would be for things. That was our big initiative last year. There are a number of aspects to this that relate to this. So Shoffley Park, has been considered as part of the Ardmore Master Plan. We have also worked last year to identify potential transformational acquisitions, and we have identified a couple of important potential acquisitions. There's also been work on to move forward the Kinwood Heritage Trails new path and access from Writers Ferry Road, which is now moving along and is planned for 2014, I believe. We did
2024.
2024. Well, yeah, I'm losing 10 years here. 2024, thank you. So when we tried to do a strategic plan for the alternative use of the township-owned open space, we got as far as identifying it. We haven't finished that strategic plan. We've also, we looked to see if there were places for pocket parks, and nothing leaped out as a good opportunity for that. But the mapping was what enabled us to really try to assess that. So this year, I've tried to focus a little bit more with the committee on the township properties. And one of the things that I did was I went on a tour of a number of township properties and discovered that while basic maintenance was being done or sometimes deferred, that there are a number of the properties that are in need of renovation. And so I think that the first priority this year would be to evaluate what it would cost to bring our township properties up to first-class condition, and also to continue the renovations in progress. This would include remediating the asbestos on the 3rd floor of the Bryn Mawr Community Center, looking at the Belmont Hills Community Center and the Ballackinwood Gym, and the house in Rolling Hill Park and Ashbridge House are in progress right now. The second priority, and this is not necessarily in the order of priorities that we would view them, but a second priority would be to complete the acquisitions of 2 previously identified properties that we identified last year. The third would be to actually prepare a strategic plan for use of the township-owned spaces. And the fourth would be to actually construct the Kinwood Heritage Trail new path access from Writers Ferry Road.
Okay, great. Any questions for Commissioner Kramer? Yeah, excuse me, Commissioner Bernhardt.
Thank you very much. Go to Commissioner Kramer. I recollect that our manager, or you may recall, a couple years ago, put together a fairly comprehensive report and study of each of the individual properties, describing them, their condition and where they were and everything else. And when you looked at the report, what jumped out was that, all right, we own a lot of properties. I mean, a large number, a surprising large number, and they have no utility for us. So while renovation to some of them may make sense if there's a useful purpose, I'd hope the committee would then consider, all right, what are the other properties that we're holding on to, and that maybe we shouldn't be holding on to them and we ought to be putting them on the market. But there is, I don't know if you saw that. I mean, I don't know if you saw that there, it was a fairly comprehensive report.
I'm not sure I've seen that report, but I would love to see it.
As a pack rat, I probably have a copy. So I'll
Thank
see
you.
if I can
If
find
you
it.
could send it to me, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, maybe our manager can find it. But I'll see if I can dig it out.
Are you thinking the evaluation we did, Dan, of our properties that might be converted to affordable housing?
I think that's what
Yes.
started it, yes, that's correct.
I would very much like to see that.
Okay, thank you.
So actually, I'll pile on next and then go to Commissioner Zeloff. The conversion to affordable housing suggests that they might actually have utility. But I know that's what you meant. So it does seem like there are like 3 categories, right? I mean, there's the things that should get renovated now, perhaps, because there's a use for them, or if you build it, they will come kind of thing. The ones that the township would never have any use for and should be, you put off to some other use, and that some other use is maybe affordable housing, right, in Commissioner Bernheim's spirit. And then the third is, perhaps there are ones that should be mothballed, because we don't have a use for it right now, but we understand that if we turn it to something else, we'll never get it back, right? We might want to hold the option of being able to use it in the future. And maybe to consider, the committee might want to consider like binning each of these into, once you've done an evaluation, into like what you would recommend. Anyway, Commissioner Zoll.
Thanks, President Sinai. I think that what Commissioner Bernheim was referring to and our manager referred to, we did find the cost to renovate for affordable housing to be extraordinarily high in most cases, which is why it didn't proceed. So potential uses, I think, is something that the committee, seems to me, should be taking a look at, as Commissioner Bernheim has said, and also the cost per square foot. The third floor of the Bryn Mawr Community Center would have an extraordinarily high cost per square foot for very limited space. But it's important to point out that the Bryn Mawr Community Center floors 1 and 2 were just significantly renovated and is now reopened and looks fabulous. So, thank you.
So to be fair, just in the spirit of what is proposed here, what I read is that the committee has proposed, like, doing those cost calculations, right? I don't see here that it says they are proposing renovating. That'd be something for the board to decide. I think what I read here that they want to actually come up exactly with those kinds of costs, Commissioner Zella, that you're speaking about.
Fair point. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. So with that, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. For Parks and Recreation Committee, Commissioner Whalen was unable to be here. But I suspect most of last year's priorities are going to roll over to this year's priorities. So I've asked Manager McNeely, maybe he could sort of give us a status report on where last year's priorities are.
Sure, and many of these are ongoing, so I assume they'll remain priorities, but the assumed priority from last year was Schaffel Plaza Park, which is part of the Ardmore Master Plan, and it also has some funding in the current budget for some engineering once we receive the Ardmore Master Plan and need to settle on a plan, since there are multiple options in the Ardmore Master Plan for this plaza. Secondly, identify potential transformational acquisitions, such as properties along the Kinwood Heritage Trail and downtown area green spaces. That was a priority last year.
I think you're on open space, right?
Oh, I am, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one.
Okay.
Parks and Rec will acquire and develop Norfolk Southern land. There is some overlap with open space and parks. Acquire and develop the Norfolk Southern land and tunnel for the trail. We've submitted 4 different design variations to Norfolk Southern. They're on their 4th version right now, and hopefully will be getting back to us with an approval for the tunnel design, and therefore then would move forward with a lease. Secondly, explore creation of additional new township amenities. Possible recommendations include an additional dog park, a skate park, water features, splash pads, in or near playgrounds, and outdoor performance spaces in township parks or other best practice amenities. Rec Department is certainly exploring options for a skate park, and identifying the right location for that one's a difficult task, but they continue to look. The board has authorized the solicitor to proceed with negotiations to acquire property for a new baseball field near Stony Run Swim Club. So that one is going forward. An RFP is being prepared for the Rolling Hill Park Master Plan, and that should be going out here any time now. And I don't know if Commissioner Whalen wants to take over.
Well, I don't know what you've said already, so I'm just double checking on that. Go with it, and I'll jump in if I need to.
Trail Improvement Network, again, a trail improvement evaluation RFP is being prepared and should also be ready to go out when Donna puts the finishing touches on it. The Parkside Kinwood Trail Extension Plan should gain SEPTA and PennDOT approval soon, which would allow us to advertise in bids in June or July, and perhaps award and start construction by the fall. Listed last year was develop a plan for a boathouse. There really hasn't been any real activity towards that objective. Additional tree planting in parks. The Parks Division is planting additional trees in a number of parks, and probably more than in past years. and also taking out trees that are diseased and have to come out. Dog park management, focus on enforcement of dog park rules, manage overcrowding. Rec had been meeting with several commissioners to talk about ways to try and get compliance in the areas where there are dog park off-leash. Recently, we have tried some enforcement, and we'll be trying some targeted enforcement in the dog parks. We'll see if it makes a difference or not. But the police department is helping out recreation department with that effort. Recycling bins in parks, they are evaluating that in the near future with between the refuse and recycling division and parks. Refuse and recycling picks up the waste containers in parks, so it's sort of a combined effort there to identify the right locations where the truck can get to them, since it's important to be able to get to the recycling containers. People power, additional.
Last two had almost no points.
Yeah,
so,
okay. Okay. We can skip them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Manager McNeely. Did you want to add anything, Commissioner Mellon?
Yeah, Manager McNeely, I'm not sure if you forecasted this or not, but a big push of late for the Parks and Rec will be the playgrounds. Something we're going to be bringing forward in the ARP dollar conversation is putting in a brand new fully accessible playground that would be fully accessible for all handicapped children. I actually just toured one in Northeast Philly. It's pretty spectacular what we can do these days with playgrounds, and so I'm going to bring that forward. We are talking about doing water features at parks. I know that Director Heller is still investigating kind of a pilot program for that, which is going to be likely the first one to at the Vernon Young redevelopment and redesign, as we're doing everything over there in the Ardmore Master Plan and the community center and all that, simply because the water features, it turns out, are actually relatively cheap to construct and to run. It's actually all the plumbing that you have to get water from somewhere to the features that makes it expensive. So we're looking at primarily locations where the plumbing's already there and it might be pretty easy to tap into. And then a big push is just going to be looking at all the playgrounds. How do we modernize them? How do we update them? Can we do that on a faster timetable than we ordinarily do? We have 19 playgrounds throughout the township, some of which even I wasn't aware of, and we're working on getting all those moving. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Anyone have any comments or questions? Commissioner Sean Kramer.
I just have a question about boathouses. I hear that the Harrington Boathouse is no longer. I believe that they can't use the boathouse in Conshohocken any longer, and I don't know if the school district, I don't know how this all works, but I'm wondering if the school district has initiated contact to talk about a boathouse or.
So the last I'm aware of is there is, I will put it as tentative, general agreement of a location of a boathouse to be put in, I'm not even sure quite what you would call it, but down in the Bala area, Pencoid. The Pencoid area, largely that hinges on our ability to purchase some of the property from the train system and redevelop that, and that basically in that area north of what you would call like that redeveloped Marriott and everything, that there is a place there that we can put a boathouse. We just need to start rolling the pieces in place before then we can get a design. But it is a priority.
If I may, Commissioner Whalen?
Of course.
We wouldn't be purchasing the property, first of all. From Norfolk Southern, it would be a like 99-year lease that we've been negotiating with them. And that includes areas, as Manager McNeely noted, going through their tunnel and going all the way up to the Kinwood Heritage Trail. There also is a potential area there for a skate park, which is under consideration. But Chris Lesween and our township manager has responded to Norfolk Southern, what, I think you said 4 times, and maybe 5 or 6.
4 times,
Yeah, and
4 plans.
each time they, had a request, we've met it, and then we've had to go back to them to get them to respond. One might think that Norfolk Southern would like some good press. This would be an excellent opportunity for them, if any of them are listening. So, there's, the opportunity for all of these things if we can pull that off.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim, and excellent point. And just a point of clarification, with the skate park, and I don't know if Manager McNeely said this, I apologize for my tardiness tonight. We are investigating a skate park in that location down in Pencoed. We are also looking at, turns out, a big push for skate parks is getting parks in locations where kids can skate to the skate park, because that is not only what they do for fun, but their main mode of transportation. So we are looking at, any place, and if any commissioners have an idea in their general area where you have a higher concentration of kids, that we might be able to put a skate park. They actually don't need to take up very much area. I don't know if you saw Narberth Borough redeveloped one tennis court into, I don't know how to judge these things, but a semi-decent skate park, and it's used by, kids all the time. So it can start small in a small area and grow, but yeah, a big push is to be able to get kids who don't need to be driven to a skate park to then use a skate park. And that's not to say that one of those isn't worthwhile and wouldn't be a great place in Pencoed, but.
Cool.
So I'll also add as a response to the boathouse point. If we look back to where this board was in terms of what it felt was priorities last year, its overwhelming priority was additional recreational amenities or improvements, right? The whether it's an additional dog park, a skate park, water features or splash pads in the playground, and other best practices amenities, right? That's what the board was looking for. Trail improvements for the trail network also had overwhelming support. And boathouses was like 50% of that. Like it was like of the tiers of like what we could get to, it was like clearly like a second priority behind these things that it seems like Park and Rec have really been working on.
Yeah. And I would say I don't know about the situation regarding the Harriton Boathouse in Conshohocken, but if the school district gets more motivated, I think that would be only a great thing for the township and getting a boathouse moving forward.
But if it's something to be added to the list for potential priorities this year,
right,
you could certainly put on the list.
Yeah.
Commissioner Grimes.
So I've been resisting saying anything, but I would just say, my understanding with regard to Conshohocken is that was the boathouse that Villanova University used. Villanova has come out publicly and announced that they're building a new boathouse. And they're raising money for it. It's on their website. So I don't know if that creates an opportunity for our high school teams, but I just would say this, that regardless, this is fundamentally should be a school district-led initiative. And for those of us who have been dealing with it for a long time, it is not something that the school district has sought to push. So while I think I certainly don't criticize anyone who is concerned about it, but there are school teams and the school district ought to lead on this issue, in my opinion.
Thank you. Commissioner McCombs.
I was going to resist the temptation to weigh in. The boathouse issue does have a long history. There is still strong community interest in developing a boathouse. As Commissioner Bernheim pointed out, the starting point, I think, is that getting the lease from Norfolk Southern, and it's moving at a pace that is slower than a snail's pace. It's hard to believe. We've allocated ARP funds for renovation of the bridge up to $1 million. It's a good location. The rowing coaches have looked at that location and said it's doable. But that's the starting point. Then that will trigger fundraising by private groups who are interested in doing it. I think that what's happening in Conshohocken is speeding that up. I agree with Commissioner Grimes that there is a school district issue. I'm not sure I agree that it is totally a school district issue, because the boathouse that was originally contemplated would have access by residents and so forth. But there are a lot of moving pieces, but the starting point obviously is getting a location to start with. I think we can all agree on that, so thank you.
So I'm going to cut this off because not part of the problem, but like, not the night to debate what things, we should or should not do. It's really a question of what we should put on the list of things for the commissioners to allocate, to score. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts about other Parks and Rec stuff? Okay. So with that, I guess the next committee is police, and that's Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. Our priorities have changed a little bit since last year. One of our top priorities last year was parking enforcement. With Director Jay Adams, I think has done a remarkable job hiring staff and bringing a lot more of enforcement focus on that. So that is no longer our top priority. It doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that it's moving pretty well under its own steam. The police committee, basically myself, Commissioner Zeloff, Grimes, Stevenson, and Sean Kramer, agreed that traffic enforcement and increasing community policing are probably shared as top priorities for the police committee. Obviously, we're all aware of the issues we face with respect to traffic enforcement. Number one, our inability to use radar. I think we've all heard the tale of woe about the General Assembly not allowing municipalities to use radar. It doesn't make any sense. I think that also ties in with sort of public safety and pedestrian issues because the statistics show that the likelihood of serious injuries or fatalities go up, hugely between 25 and 35, and the way people speed on our township roads at 45, 50 miles an hour, it really is very dangerous. So I think that's a priority. So I think enforcement is huge. It's something we understand. There are issues with deployment. We have a large township. It has to be patrolled, and officers have 12-hour shifts, but we think enforcement has to be a priority, and even if it means going back to old-fashioned means of catching speeders. Also, I think it's important. We've seen a lot of really widespread interest in community policing, and while we haven't quite defined precisely what that means, in my mind, I think in the minds of the people on the committee, it means a more visible presence of police officers, not in their vehicles, walking or on bike patrols, particularly in our town centers, Ardmore, Bala, Bryn Mawr, Gladwin Village. It sends a message. I think it increases a sense of the police being there. It increases non-confrontational interactions between residents and the police, and I think it's a good thing. And again, I think that's something that we'll have to work with the police department on, because we understand deployment, we understand resources, but I think it's important that the community sense, and I think perhaps all of our sense as to what is the way to go really should take place. Finally, another priority is our police engagement subcommittee, which is chaired by Commissioner Sean Kramer. She's done a great job. Without getting into all the details, this arose out of the January 6th stop, and all of us who witnessed, there was a fair amount of division within the community about police operations and whether there was an understanding as to why the police did what they did and so forth, and whether they were doing it correctly. So what we've done through this committee and Commissioner Kramer's efforts is to engage residents throughout the township to get their input in terms of ways that we can have better communications between and among us, interactions with the police, and that's ongoing. I think we've all been pretty pleased with how that's progressing. At some point, we'll probably be putting together a report that we will put out, but that's underway, and I think we've made a good start on that. So I'll defer to Commissioner Kramer if there's anything she wants to add, but I think that's essentially the where we are on that.
No, that's a great summary. The community has been wonderful. We've talked to people from all around the township, a diverse array of folks, and we've gotten really constructive feedback and a strong spirit of collaboration, wanting to do whatever they can to work with the police department. And yeah, I think we're gonna make some progress in the year ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner. President Stein, it for the police committee report.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McComb. Any questions or comments for Commissioner McComb or Commissioner Sean Kramer? Yeah, Vice President
One
Gabbard.
question for Commissioner McComb. You know, you talked about radars, and we've said so many times that we can't, and we're handicapped by that, which is a real shame in this state. We just had a meeting with the Rosemont Villanova Civic Association about speeding, traffic safety, safety in general. It's obviously something we've all heard multiple times. I know that because we can't use radar, we're really limited in what we can do. I know we tried lowering speed limit on part of Montgomery Avenue. We've looked at doing it on other areas. Is there a possibility of kind of throwing into the priority list, looking for innovative ways or other ways to reduce speeding within the township? Being more creative, coming up with things, you know, pilot programs, seeing what else is out there. There may be nothing, there may be no way to do it. This isn't a Lower Merion issue. It's not even a regional issue. This is a national issue. But are there opportunities to see if anything can be done to look at kind of those opportunities, whether it's bringing in outside help or doing it through brainstorming sessions or communicating, you know, with the public? Is that something that can and should be within this mix of potential priorities?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion. You said initially sort of the lowering of the speed limit on Montgomery Avenue. Unfortunately, people who are inclined to speed, if it's 25 or 35 and they're inclined to go 55 or 60, really doesn't make a lot of difference. I mean, I think you really, at that point, need to have, you know, enforcement, ticketing, major fines, and so forth. But certainly anything, I agree. I don't think we should just sit there and say, what was us because of the state not allowing us to use radar. I think we really have to do something to bring the speeding under control and let people know it's unacceptable behavior. And if you're caught speeding, there'll be consequences. So, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Kramer?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I know that Chris Leswing will often say, you know, if you need enforcement to make people slow down, then you built your road wrong, you know? And that, I know some roads can't be modified for a number of reasons, but I think that the Building and Planning Committee has some tricks up their sleeve about how to make roads, make drivers have to drive slower on roads, creative solutions, and I wonder if there's, you know, room for the building and planning folks and the traffic safety folks to come up with some more options for some of the roads. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow it entirely. There is a school of thought, and I've spoken to people on the traffic safety unit that says that people drive at a speed they think is safe.
Right.
And so that's what kind of guides our behavior, which is one of the reasons you don't just stick a stop sign in the middle of a street just to get people to stop, because if there are no visual cues saying we should stop here, they'll blow through the stop sign, making people less safe rather than safer. So, but I think the problem is we have so much traffic, and again, I'm not going to belabor this because I know this is just this sort of a quick workshop, but you have people who get off the express and they're so happy to see a stretch of non-congested. They go flying up Presidential. They'll go flying up to 60 or 70 miles an hour just because they're grateful to get off of, you know, and they do that throughout the township. You're on Montgomery Avenue, you think, I'll just cut through this street and there's no one there, and you got it. And we all drive cars that like have a gazillion horsepower, and, you know, it's like, it's frustration and a lot of other things. But I just think it has to be really enforcement, and it has to be more consistent and steady than it has been. Commissioner Zaloff?
Thanks, Commissioner McComb, to Vice President Garen's comments. I think we do find creativity from our township engineer. Because they can go beyond what traffic safety typically would look at. And it may be time for the committee to take a look at our traffic calming policy, which has been in place for 3 or 4 years, and it may be time to review that. We just pointed out the traffic safety unit. They're doing a lot of good work. That's been my experience, particularly recently. So thank you.
Commissioner Ryan?
I don't want to belabor the point. I would just throw in a plug for I know we had a pilot program for the speed hump. I think we did it at River Road, and I know we did it on Gypsy Lane. I drive down Gypsy Lane all the time. It is fantastically successful on that road. I mean, that road from Montgomery going up into Penn Valley used to be a 70-mile-an-hour stretch where you finally got off Montgomery and every single car was blasting down there. And now there are 3 speed humps on there. And the traffic at the speed hump is, 5 miles an hour, but it almost never gets above 30 the rest of the way because everyone's preparing for that next speed hump. So I would just suggest, if to Commissioner Zoll's point, if we are going to look at our traffic calming, I know in my ward there are a couple of places I want to talk about putting speed humps. I don't know what that process fully entails after the pilot program, but I've been really wowed at how successful it is.
Yes, President Sinai.
Thanks. So I just wanted to echo something that the psychologist on the board said, Commissioner Sean Kramer, which is people seem to drive the speed at which they feel comfortable, like you said, but my sense is, and perhaps this is something that the committee could look at, that there are other things that can be done that perhaps not all that expensive that make it feel less comfortable to drive fast, right? Like more street trees overhanging the road tends, I think, to make people drive slower. Narrower lanes tends to make them feel less safe speeding. They tend to drive a little slower. I think putting a median in tends to make them drive slower. And these are all perhaps arrows in the quiver that could get to that speeding thing, if the committee wants to.
Certainly worth considering. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. So then we are on to the Sustainability Committee, and its chair is Commissioner Courtney.
All right, there it is. Okay. You guys all got a link to this. I speak in bullets, so this is helpful for me and hopefully helpful for you. Let's just jump right in. I love a good infographic. We don't have coal plants or airplanes, so you can ignore 1 and 7. But the other ones are, you will see the goals touching on this. The sustainability plan touches on all of these elements that we as individuals and as a township can do to reduce our carbon footprint and to live more sustainably in general. Let's go back to last year. I presented 4 goals as part of the Sustainability Committee's objectives. The Sustainability Plan was obviously the biggest one and has been presented to us, and I think next month we will have a formal receipt of said plan. And the best part of the Sustainability Plan, tonight at least, is how it made this process very easy. In that all the work that Paloma put in, I said, what do you think our priorities should be? And she just rattled off a list of things that you will see in here. Single-use plastics was another one that received a lot of board support, and we just advertised that. And I am optimistic we will be adopting it in a month or so. The 2 that didn't receive as much support, electric lawn equipment, even though it's one of our biggest complaints. It is the loudest thing in the township at the moment. So we're re-recommending it. And for food composting, that did receive some support, but we were somewhat resource constrained. But I have been informed that we've just hired a new recycling specialist on township staff, and this might be something that would fall in there. So we're recommending that again this year, but in a different way. So the first thing I'm throwing up here is community education, and that is because it was the comment made the most when we were last discussing the sustainability plan by all of you. I thought, let's take that and continue. There's so much outreach went into the sustainability plan and so much community partnership that we can just continue with that. When I show you these sort of dense walls of text, the goal is the title, and there's just description here, and when you see references to ED1, ED8, those are references to items, strategies within the sustainability plan itself. I'm not saying we will do all 4 of these as part of community education, but we will do pieces of each of these. These are the strategies that are in the plan to sort of address aspects of how we would engage the community and educate individuals and homeowners and business owners about ways that they can improve sustainability and lower carbon footprint. So, this is a scary infographic, and I will explain it for just a second. What we're looking at is what it takes to reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions in general. And we talk a lot about new technologies and plantings, but what we really have to do right now is what's called emergency brakes, and that's, you can translate that as turning off pollution. Right, the biggest effect we need to have and have to reduce our carbon footprint to the point that we will not go over 1.5 degrees of warming is to stop putting things out there. And so you see the gradient in the colors is sort of how they phase in and phase out in terms of their effectiveness. So the most effective thing we can do right now is put on the brakes. And then you see as that red line comes down due to the things we're doing to stop emissions, that's when these other things kick in terms of transitioning to electric systems for carbon solar systems, social interventions, things like behavior change and more plantings, and then eventually new technology. And those are the sort of things that lift the green line in terms of carbon removal projects. And then the dotted blue line is the effect we would expect. And so just to emphasize, what are those emergency brakes? The ones that I think are most relevant tonight: slowing ecosystem degradation. So we'll talk about natural resources, tree canopy, open space, energy efficiency. That's the next slide, and then cutting waste. So, energy transition. I put the highlight in green and bold just because I want to make sure these are the things, the individual items that people on this board have discussed, that we've heard from the community as things of importance. But the goal of energy transition, obviously, is to go from fossil fuels to renewable resources, as well as to reduce our consumption overall. We've already engaged in are starting to transition to electric vehicles on our fleet. That second one, ET2, carbon-free municipal building and maintenance equipment, is our own leaf blowers and lawn equipment. And then energy transition and incentives is the community's leaf blowers and lawn equipment. And then, yes. Also in here is, I should have highlighted it. It's my favorite one, ET1, carbon-free municipal electricity. This is the biggest bang for our buck according to the sustainability plan. If we transition to completely carbon-free energy sources for township electricity, we can reduce our carbon footprint by something like half. So, miss with my highlighter. Next up, policy and resiliency. This is really talking about how we will design the future of our township. Can we work into the Ardmore Master Plan and other plans a sustainability incentive? So comprehensive code audit and update sounds huge, but we would be strategic in the way in which we tackle that. And the first one would be the feedback that I got from the Ardmore Master Plan, which is to propose what a sustainability incentive would be if we wanted to have additional height in Ardmore in exchange for improved or reduced carbon emissions in our building. That could also be adopting things like incentives for the Green Building Code, et cetera. And then the other one I wanted to call out is multimodal access. We've had a bunch of conversations about sidewalks, about biking, and about traffic safety, and focusing on alternatives to driving would be a great way to improve safety. And I should have said at the beginning, there's a lot of overlap here between sustainability priorities and other committees' priorities. And I'm sorry I didn't reach out to all of you ahead of time, but Paloma is eager to collaborate with all the other departments, as is the Sustainability Committee, in terms of improving our township overall. Waste minimization, we've sort of, we've seen a little bit how recycling costs, we don't make money on our commingled, it's actually expensive. We are not making as much money on our paper, and so if it's possible to reuse things in a different way, that's what this means, a circular model of resource consumption. And the big winner here in terms of public interest and our interest is the compost program. And we already have the compost program in terms of yard waste, so this would be looking into other ways we could use that, as well as opportunities to do food composting and other residential organic waste. And I think this is my last slide. Natural resources and open space. We heard about this from the Open Space Committee. Doing a natural resources inventory of the township from the perspective of sustainability, or at least tacking on sustainability. We might be able to sell some of these properties. We might want to preserve these properties because they help us with our carbon footprint. Maybe some of these properties would be great for renewable energy sources. I don't know if we have room for windmills, but maybe extra solar panels, geothermal, things like that. And then community forest expansion. There's been a lot of talk recently about our tree canopy, how we've been cutting down trees a little more aggressively than we probably would, how things like stormwater damage is weakening root beds and we're losing trees due to that. So digging in more, getting a better survey of trees and green space in the township and how we might promote that. So these are the sort of 5 areas that we want to tackle as the Sustainability Committee and the strategies that go along with them.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Courtney. Questions or comments for Commissioner Whalen?
Simply a comment and an explanation as to the Parks and Rec overlap here. We did not put, as Parks and Rec recommend, key priority for this year, using our own electric lawn care. That is not because we don't care about it, it's because we keep trying. Director Heller actually tries multiple times a year with different electrical, either lawn care, accessories or vehicles, and we are desperately trying to incorporate those and replace our gas-powered vehicles and accessories for lawn care, and they simply just can't. They're not there yet. While they may be, really beneficial for individual homeowners, at this point, really from a commercial aspect on the township side, when the township has to go out and mow, all of South Ardmore Park, the electric options just simply don't succeed yet. But we are with you, and we will continue to try. Director Heller is trying every 6 months or so. She's looking into it again, seeing what else has come out, what the battery life is now, what we can do. So we're happy to collaborate with Paloma.
Sounds great.
So I have a question for you, Commissioner Courtney. This is just a clarifying one, given that we're going to have to allocate points to these. Can you be a little more specific about what a natural resources inventory is? I think I know from what, I'm not sure. Actually, I know what it is. It's admittedly left broad because I think we as a board can prioritize where we want to go with it. I think it's increasing understanding of what we have in the township and what we want to preserve is basically the goal. Okay, so that might include like open space, it might include planted areas, it might include habitat. I'm not
right.
just.
There's also an idea of resiliency, like we want to maintain our waterways. We don't. We already have MS4 stormwater compliance issues that we want to make sure we're not polluting downstream.
Okay. Thank you. Vice President Gabbard.
So a couple things. One, there's so much exciting and important stuff on there, so thank you and the committee for doing that. To echo what Commissioner Whalen said, I think last year the lawn equipment got a low priority, not because everyone on this board didn't want to do it. I think it's because we're not there yet, and we know there's so much commercial work that's done in the township. It just wasn't feasible. I don't know if that's changed or not, but one thing I've heard from President Sinai a couple times is he's talked about converting his personal use to electric lawn leaf blower Is there a way to, you talked a lot about education, one, educate people on people who do personal lawn care to either rake instead of use leaf blowers, or use electric leaf blowers for a personal, and lawn mowers for personal use. Is there a way for us to also incentivize that? Can we give rebate, township rebate somehow on the personal use? I think those are both potential opportunities. On the composting, I had a question. Is that just personal or also for restaurants? Is that part of the thinking?
And I think I'll go compost first. I think if we go after restaurants, we get a much greater impact, but it also requires a heavier lift, if you will. If we're going to go after personal compost, we already offer compost bins in the township. There are services like Mother Compost that people can subscribe to. And I think what the issue we run into is if we were going to do our own municipal compost, where would it go? And we've talked about a pilot, and I would have to defer to Paloma as to what she thinks, whether it would be, let's go after restaurants first because there are options for homeowners, or give it, if we wanted to start at a lower level, would we try to do some kind of compost through our recycling and refuse division? I think from my perspective, my priority would probably be the restaurants. But I think what I would like to say is, Paloma, you've analyzed this, you've seen what other communities are doing, you know what options are out there, you've talked with Public Works. What do you think is the right way to move forward on this project?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I think the whole purpose of this was to figure out what are the priorities, and then once we know what the priorities are, build it out and say, is it restaurants, is it personal? But I think I don't want to lose that thought on restaurants as well. The third, you had mentioned, you said, if we go to carbon-free electricity, we can reduce our footprint significantly. I know a few years ago we switched over to, and I know some of us, we've had a lot of discussions on what that truly means. If you can just educate everybody who's watching on what have we done, what could we do next?
Right. Paloma always cautions me whenever I draw on that stat, that the first thing we have to do is do a more thorough study of where our electricity comes from and what our consumption looks like. So she says it is a potential for that much reduction. What we did a few years ago was switch from regular municipal electricity to what's called green, and that's effectively us buying RECs or basically paying for a premium for either renewable energy, or I think the way it really works is that you pay for someone else to build solar panels, and it's a premium on top of your energy, and so that even though your energy might come from a non-renewable source, in the future there's now more renewable energy on the grid because of this premium that we paid. So the question that needs to be analyzed is that enough, like a carbon offset, carbon tax kind of thing that we're paying, or do we really want to go even further and say all of our electricity comes from renewable resources, there is no coal burned, no emissions as part of the electricity that our township consumes?
Great, thank you. Yeah, like I said, it's exciting, it's important. Rock on. Keep going.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Gilder Kramer.
I just wanted to mention that as we've discussed these 5 priorities in our committee meetings, we believe that all 5 of them should be things that, or can be things that we can work on next year. That it isn't a choice between one or the other. It's a question of trying to work on all 5 simultaneously.
Yeah. That's a great point, and I think we have a sustainability manager. These are what she put forth as what she thinks her priorities will be. She will work on all of these. So in some ways, what we are asking you to prioritize is how much collaboration will be with other departments, and sort of systemically, what do we think are the important things to approach?
Great, and I'm going to make a suggestion because I'm going to follow up on. It's not just leaf blowers. I'm all electric on all lawn equipment, and in case anyone's watching this, I can mow continuously. I've nearly half an acre. I can mow continuously on 2 batteries, because by the time one has exhausted with the current technology, I've recharged the other one. And so I go about 2 hours of mowing. Don't ask me why I am doing the 2 hours. I do the 2 hours of mowing. And I can do that on electric equipment, right? So I don't have like lawnmower range anxiety. But it's evolving. And so I encourage you to, because we're going to be scoring these things. You have an opportunity when we phrase this for the scoring to be, specific about what you're proposing for that. Because, again, it may not be one size fits all kind of thing, or whatever you're looking to have done. And that's the opportunity to see if you can get the support that you didn't get last year.
Will do.
Okay, great. So the last item is, I asked people if they had potential priorities that they wanted to put on this list that wasn't specific to any existing committee. I'm going to start with one that's kind of spurred a little bit by Commissioner Courtney's a tree canopy observation. And this one comes from me. It wasn't suggested by anyone else. And that's something that a number of us have observed over time, and I've certainly observed to a number of you, which is the issue of trees in this township spans departments, right? It's clearly a sustainability issue. It ends up being a public works issue because that's where our arborist is housed. It's a building and planning issue because it ends up showing up in land development and zoning and things like that. We know from research that trees are valuable not just for the environment, but they also enhance property values in the township. We also have an annual report from the Shade Tree Commission last year that needs to be worked through. And so one thing that I will ask this board is is this the year to take a look at this and see if we're going at this whole overarching concept of trees the right way? Right? Should we put together, I'm not sure what the committee format would be, whether it be an existing committee or a different committee, whether this is the time to take a look and say, are we doing this under our structure, right? Should we restructure how we as a board think about it, or whatever, right? I mean, in the category of not knowing what you don't know, right? It would be the basic, building up some information to try and figure that out. If the board thinks it would be a priority. Yeah.
I would just to make a comment on that several people over the last couple of months have said that, we've declined our tree canopy by 12%, something like that. So obviously something isn't working. And I would think that the shade tree would be the logical place to have this direction.
So I think the point of whether it's set as a priority is to set a committee to figure out exactly the answers, that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Rather than doing it here. But yeah, Commissioner McCollum.
I support it. I think it's a great idea. And I've said this in the past, the difficulty and the Shade Tree Commission does a great job, and the Shade Tree Division of Public Works does a great job. But the hardest thing about getting trees planted in the township is talking to residents about finding a location. And Joe Marco is a certified arborist, and he has a staff. They don't really have the resources to go out and sort of spend that time with residents. So if we could get more residents to understand the value of having a tree, but that's an appropriate thing for somebody other than the Shade Tree Division or the Shade Tree Commission.
So Commissioner McComb, I would observe that if we go to residents and tell them that people will speed less on their streets if they plant a shade tree, maybe we will get some more of that.
Oh. Great suggestion.
Okay. Commissioner Zella.
And President Sinai, does that fall under education? I mean, communicating out to our residents about, we have more trees than places to plant them. And what you just said about trees slow traffic, right? Just like parked cars slow traffic. So parked cars on streets.
I appreciate it. This is why it becomes a proposal to see if the township thinks if the board thinks we should work on these issues. Sure. Rather than doing it tonight. Okay, so we're not voting tonight. That would be one of them. Okay, so the other ones suggested from other commissioners. So if there are questions, they can be directed towards those commissioners. So from Commissioners Gilda Kramer, Commissioner Sean Kramer proposed a priority item of reviewing and discussing part-time seasonal and hourly worker wages with consideration of a $15 an hour minimum wage for all employees. I did do both of these, and then you can ask your questions. And then suggested by Commissioner Kramer is a regular diversity reporting by HR to the board. I presume like the kind of stuff that I get on the private board at the end of every year. You just sort of like management says, hey, this is where we are. Anyway, so those are the two things that that will show up in the spreadsheet that you're going to get voting on. Whether, minimum wage has been something that I think is developed. It's just a question of whether we devoted agenda time to it. And then Commissioner Sean Kramer's. Commissioner Krantz.
Yeah, I just maybe have a question for the Commissioners Kramer on the $15 thing. I mean, we already have had that discussion, and I expect we will again as part of our budget discussion. Is your thinking that we need to have it separately from the budget discussion? Because I would think we'll have it in the budget discussion again anyway.
Yeah.
And that's an honest question. I'm just trying to
I will
get a
defer to
sense.
the other Commissioner Kramer.
Yeah, I think I would propose that we should have the conversation separate from the budget discussion, because by the time we get to budget talks, it's late in the game. We want to think it through in advance.
And I'll add to that. I mean, I think the point of putting on the priority list is like, basically, we have scarce time. If this is a issue that's important to the board, then we will put it on the agenda and have it in the appropriate time so we can actually have a discussion as a board. If it's not something that the board wants to prioritize our time on, then we won't, right? I mean, this is democracy in action. I'd like to try and figure that out. Otherwise, it just kind of gets, as Commissioner Kramer shows up, it kind of shows up late and is not very well developed. Yeah.
If I may, just as a point of procedure, the problem with doing that, I'm not talking about the topic itself, it's the procedure, is that you then start having the exceptions that are going to swallow the rule, in that each thing, there are a number of items which somebody's going to find that, important that goes into the budget. All right, does that get its own airtime in advance of the budget? This would be a budget issue, and it then would be incumbent upon the board to make appropriate time to discuss it, because it dovetails into the budget. You can't do it in a vacuum. It's got to be done along with everything else. So while this is something I agree with Commissioner Grimes that we would anticipate would come forward. There was a lot of discussion last year. Would anticipate there'll be more discussion this year. But it's a matter of timing, and I would suggest that we want to keep it with the budget, because otherwise we're going to be yanking a number of things out, and I think that'd be the proper way to do it. Keep it there.
Yeah. If I might respond to that, that makes sense. I think that because this isn't an item that easily lives in a committee that we already have, so if it did, the committee would work this up, right, and with staff and look at and benchmark hourly wages and consider the pros and cons of doing this and the cost of doing this. So if there's a committee where this lives, then that's where this should get handled in advance of the budget. But in the event that it doesn't, I would think that we should do it.
Right, not to have it back and forth, but we have the finance committee and our manager, and this would be something that would be put on, for our CFO to give everybody the data and the analysis about it so they can make a decision.
So I'm going to interject here, which is, this is a topic that we have discussed before, right? And it is up to this board to give direction to staff, which is and to me, which is like, should we devote staff time to develop more materials and bring them forward again, whether it's as part of the budget or whatever. Like that's really what the point of this process is. Right. Is like, how do we allocate our resources, right? And this is and so this is a chance for people to weigh in on that. So that's the reason it shows up here and the reason it's showing up this way. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Great. Well, that concludes this meeting. We have a brief post-board. So if everyone can join me in the caucus room, then we'll do that.